Only some characters out there are a treasure trove of memorable quotes, and even if they are, we can bet our bottom dollar that they're nowhere near as iconic as Ragnar Lothbrok. The man's whole brand is one unforgettable quote after another. Each one of these proves that he was the most ambitious of kings. To see where we're coming from, stick around till the end of this video. First up, we have his valuable instructions for his sons. If there's one thing parents enjoy the most, it's turning everything into a lecture. You might not agree with us on this, but Ragnar was no different regarding his children. This attitude was best reflected in his instructions to his sons during their first conquest. For those who don't remember, at some point in Season 4, Episode 6, he advises his sons not to waste their time looking back. By back, of course, he meant Kattegat.
Don't waste your time looking back. You're not going that way.
Yes, we know it was a bit harsh of him, especially considering it was their first time out of Kattegat and, to boot, away from their mother. But here's another way of looking at it: he deeply cared for his sons and wanted to train them to be strong men. Besides portraying him as a dedicated father, the quote also cemented him as a good ruler. To elaborate, one of the ways to become a good king is to ensure that your future generations are fit to rule as well. While we don't, or rather can't, say this for Ivar, Bjorn, it's quite evident, benefited greatly from his father's sage advice. For anyone who disagrees, you need to go back and watch how he made all the Vikings rally around him against Russ's army. The next time your dad gives you a pep talk, stick around, it could greatly benefit you down the line. Moving on to his justification for allying himself with King Ecbert. The third episode of the third season, which, if our memory serves us correctly, was titled Warrior's Fate, also contained an example that painted him as a good parent and a wise ruler. Do you remember when he joined forces with King Ecbert for the Mercian throne? If yes, you might also remember how Floki wasn't pleased to work with his sworn enemies. But instead of giving in to Floki's outrage, he schooled him on how the alliance was not about them, but their future generations. To quote, "It's about our children and their children."
This is not about you, Floki. It's about our children and their children.
Some might argue that Ecbert didn't keep his end of the bargain, but yep, there's a but. It doesn't mean that Ragnar was wrong to initiate a peaceful union with the Christians. From a ruler's and parents' point of view, it was an excellent scheme to gain lands and power for future generations. Up next, we have him describing life to a T. Before we dive into this quote's relevance, let's disclaimer that we, under no circumstances, condone cheating. Whatever we're saying is only in the show's context. Alright, let's get into the quote now. For this one, we'd like you to think back to the first season. Do you recall his trip to Gotaland? Yep, where he then cheated on his wife Lagertha with Aslog. You got it, it's the same episode where he went on to abandon his people as well. If you've managed to remember all this, you might also remember that quote with which he justified his actions to Aslog. He said, and we quote, "Life doesn't come with an instruction manual." We know it deserves the award for the worst justification in the history of justifications, but hear us out, this line showcases that he wasn't the perfect king. And admit it or not, if it weren't for his affair, he would never have fulfilled his dreams of fathering many sons and extending the legacy of his people. So yeah, everything he did was an extension of his mission. Additionally, there's his apt description of the Viking way of life. Another line from Warrior's Fate perfectly explains why he was one of the best kings on Vikings. If this episode wasn't one of your favorites, let's remind you that it's where he expressed how fighting is the Viking mode of life. Not just that, from what we remember, he also elaborates how fighting is how his people both live and die. So basically, on the one hand, we have the Ragnar who's in favor of forming alliances. On the other, we have the Ragnar who won't shy away from honoring the ways of his people. A true advocate of the best of both worlds philosophy, if you ask us. Not to mention when he was upfront about his struggles. All jokes aside, one of the things that makes him such a good ruler is how he's hyper aware of his tragic flaw, aka his ambitious nature. You might not remember it now, but a line in episode 4, season 4 fully captures this struggle. To quote, "I am constantly torn between killing myself for everyone around me."
I'm constantly torn between killing myself or everyone around me.
We know it's a highly shocking utterance, however, it was important for us to list because it reflects how he didn't feel like power made him superior to others. As you can tell from this line, he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders and was constantly plagued by the responsibility to make the right decisions for his subjects. Coming up, we've his opinions on wielding power. Since we're on the subject of power, there's one more quote we'd like to discuss. If our memory serves us right, this quote was uttered in Season 3, Episode 1, i.e., mercenary. This quote struck a chord with us because besides illuminating his qualities as a ruler, like some of the lines we've discussed, it also tells of his role as a caring father. Fret not if you can't seem to put your finger on it. It's when he tells his son Bjorn that power doesn't signify control, it's something that comes only to those who are willing to lower themselves to pick it up.
Power is only given to those who are prepared to lower themselves to pick it up.
Now, this line was self-contradictory, but from where we see it, Ragnar makes a good point about how people in power need to humble themselves. Despite struggling with it, he knew to keep his ambition in check. Let's also talk about the quote that helped him reinforce his power. Now, don't let his opinions on wielding power fool you into thinking that he wants nothing to do with it. No, sir. The most famous quote from the series negates this idea. The real ones know which dialogue we're talking about. If, sadly, you're not a real one, or, on the contrary, a real one with the memory of a goldfish, don't worry, we've got you covered. It's, and we quote, "Who wants to be king?"
Who wants to be king?
Yes, you're right. He said this upon returning to Kattegat after being defeated at the hands of Rollo. His people had started mistrusting him, but it wasn't for long. He confronted them with this quote and re-established himself in no time. To add to that, despite his defeat, his ambition was unwavering. The way he kept working on getting others to follow him to England one last time is proof of that. Up next, his somewhat final words. If you thought you were the only one hoping for him to bounce back from a literal pit of deadly snakes, you've got another thing coming. We were all kind of hoping for that to happen, but it unfortunately did not. Still, some of our sadness dissipates when he heard him say his death had come without apology. Before you pointed out, we acknowledge that his ambition got him into the situation, but hey, you can also look at it because he was willing to fight for his people right up to the end. And in that, ladies and gentlemen, lie another reason he was an excellent king. Nope, this isn't up for debate. That's as good a king as they come. Last but not least, the quote that established him as an ambitious man. If you've recently binge-watched the show again, you might have noticed how Ragnar is portrayed as an ambitious man from the get-go. A line that encapsulates this is the one where he compares himself to Odin while speaking to his Bjorn. Simply put, he explains how, unlike Odin, he's willing to sacrifice much more than his eye to attain what he desires. Another very interesting way of looking at this quote is that he sees himself as possessing even more enthusiasm than the gods themselves. Very apt comparison when you consider that he rose to such prominence when he was born a simple farmer, not a jarl or nobleman. His ambition took him places and allowed him to go where no other man dared. And that's a wrap for this video, my friends. Which of these quotes did you like the best? Can you think of some other cool Ragnar lines? Whose quotes or qualities should we list next time? Please let us know in the comments below, and make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.